When we first started here, we used to take and roll sausage one by one, and we was in Atmore, and we seen them roasting corn all with these grills like that, and we made these grills and made it so much easier to cook sausage.
This park is so lucky to have these fine examples of Mahan field fortifications, the same type fortifications that were used in battlefields such as Petersburg and Vicksburg, but they were destroyed after the battle. But they left them here in pristine shape, and so they're very lucky to have such fine examples of fortifications. The troops that fought here for the Confederacy was members of the Department of the Gulf, which included East Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. These groups had their own commanders and were really isolated from the armies in North Virginia. The fact that Lee had surrendered in the same day did not end the Civil War. In fact, the Civil War did not end until May of that same year, 1865.
Well, the siege of these works was part of a larger siege of the entire Eastern Shore defenses, involving between 25 and 40,000 federal land forces engaged at 3 to 4 major fortifications. This siege broke because of a two-pronged reinforced federal line coming down out of the raid on Pollard coming down out of Stockton. The troops belonging to General Steele were here for a better part of a week, working on parallels, which are fortifications, and working on gun emplacements. During that time, the Confederate Navy is patrolling up and down the river, lobbing shell into their works. This redoubt and other redoubts like it, circling the old town of Blakely and the old docks, are lobbing shell into the Federal parallels as the Federals try to dig their trenches forward and dig other parallels closer and closer in standard siege tactics. The siege broke when the main Federal body came up to reinforce this force from their victory down at Fort Spanish. Then there was a timed, calculated frontal assault. This was the last large infantry assault on works in the war. The war east of the Mississippi would end here approximately 1 month later to the west of Mobile with the final surrender of the largest army in the eastern part of the United States. The war in the Trans-Mississippi, west of the Mississippi River, a few small skirmishes after this, and the Shenandoah steamed into port in the fall of '65, and the war was officially over. Armies did not all surrender on one day. It's just a matter of coincidence that this battle was fought the same day that Lee surrendered the Army of Northern Virginia, but he did not have authority to surrender all the forces. The Federal general operating in Mobile, after taking this fortification a day and a half later, marched into Mobile. Mobile was surrendered by the mayor. The Confederate Army departed for Meridian, Mississippi. In that ensuing month, the generals eventually met and determined a peace.
Individuals whose relatives fought this battle to step forward to give you the names of their ancestors and their units. Present! Arms! Charles Langley, Harvard, 2nd New Jersey Cavalry. Thank you.
William D. McLaughlin, 62nd Cavalry. Robert E. Gady, 62nd Alabama Company K.
This is a reenactment of the Battle of Blakely that happened on April 9th, 1865. It was one of the last major engagements of the American Civil War. Robert E. Lee had surrendered on this morning on April 9th, 1865, and actually the war in the east part of the theater, which is the Virginia area, was over, but the Western armies were still fighting. They did not have the communications they had today, and they did not know that Robert E. Lee had already surrendered. Now, technically, the war was still going on in the West, and there were a lot of battles besides Blakely after this, but this was one of the last major battles with over 45,000 Federal troops and around 3,000 Confederates here at Blakely. And it's just an important battle to remember. It's important for local history, and in a time when cutbacks are hurting parks, I think it's just important that the people in this area really appreciate what they've got in their own backyard and try to support it to the best that they can.
Had several jobs that they could do in the war. The federal government paid one woman for every 10 men, maximum of 4 per company, to be the laundress cook. It was also her job to keep the dice and the cards when the men went to battle because they didn't want to be caught dead gambling. It would have been a dishonor to their family. So she stayed behind when the gentlemen would go out to fight, and she would take care of the dice and the cards and their bedrolls and keep the fire going and make sure they had food when they came back. The laundress was very important. The gentleman only had probably 2 shirts and 2 sets of underwear. was very important for her to sew and to keep them clean, keep them in good repair. They couldn't just go to Walmart and buy another pair. Another thing that the women did is participate as nurses. Now, they didn't have a medical corps until about halfway through the war. The federal government set that up, but the Confederates never really got the whole ambulance system. So you might have a man who was trained as somewhat of a medic and then a woman that would assist him. The Confederate government didn't pay laundresses and seamstresses, but the gentlemen in the company would pool their money and pay them. It was occasionally a widow of someone that had been in the company, and since her husband was deceased, she no longer had an income. This was a way for her to stay solvent. Also, the women, as they traveled, if you wanted to go to Jacksonville, you just didn't get in a wagon and go. You waited until some soldiers were going, and then you'd follow them along so you'd be safe. Now, the federal government issued one toothbrush for every 10 men. The toothbrushes then were bone or wood handle with boar bristles. The Confederate Army did not issue toothbrushes at all to their men. The only Confederate regulation about teeth was that when you enlisted, you had to have one on top and one on bottom that lined up. This is a cartridge, and you had to be able to tear off the cartridge to pour the black powder in your gun. But during the war, as it progressed, that regulation was dismissed with, and they didn't care if you had two teeth that lined up upon re-enlistment. They didn't bathe a lot then. In fact, women would use animal fat on their hair to slick it down. A woman of my age, hair would have always been very restrained, tight in the back in a bun or braided. You would have always had a hat on in public. You would have always worn mitts, because if I touched you with my bare palm, I'd have to marry you. It was indecent, just as indecent as it would be for one of the men to be seen in their suspenders. They would always have a vest or a jacket over it. They didn't bathe. They really didn't wash their hair. You've got to understand, back then we didn't know about germs. We lost as many Confederates to dysentery as we did to wounds. They didn't know that you cleaned off the blade or the bone saw in between amputations and how important that was. You know, the war between the states gave us modern medicine. It was the first time they started to understand that there might be something to not have the horses and the men use the same creeks. So we learned a lot about medicine during that era, but we didn't understand it. The women that were laundresses would stand in line with the men on Saturday night in formation. They were at the back, of course, and they would get the rum ration that everybody else got. They wanted you to drink it in line because they didn't want you to hoard it or to share it, and we got that too. The federal laundresses, which are the Yankees, they were Federals back then, they got the same pay that the privates got, but they didn't get battle rations. They didn't get extra food for battle, but they did get the rum rations. And the Confederate women were just paid by the troops as they could. During the long campaigns when the gentlemen would march across several states, of course, we wouldn't have been there. You need a wagon to transport these laundry barrels, and none of the privates are willing to carry one around. We would have always been in the garrisons, but if they had done a cross-country march or like a 3 or 4 day forage into an area, we would have stayed back, and then they would have come back to us. But it would have been impossible for the women to follow the troops to all the situations that they went. Of course, the women were at a disadvantage because you didn't know where the troops were. So you would stay in a garrison-type situation like this with the tents and then hope that they or another unit would come by.
Attention, battalion. Shoulder, arms. Fire by battalion. Battalion, ready. High elevation, aim. Fire. Shoulder. Arms.
This activity is a community activity that we get together and enjoy and have friends and fellowship together. We have several projects. This project that we're working on now is to build a park at the old Stockton School ground. We have other activities that we have not finalized at this point.
This event we created, and we'll try to get the community involved. We actually end up filling a lot of motel rooms over here just for that one weekend because they've been coming back again and again. We've got a few other things that in conjunction with the Mullets Swing Golf Tournament, one of the golf courses over here, helps us with that. And then we also have done the Mullet Man Triathlon the last 8 years. And we've got, and that starts, actually kicks off the week because that's the week, Saturday before that. We get 600-700 people, including myself. They're coming down here in bikes. It costs more than people's cars sometimes to do this little triathlon thing. So again, that helps to benefit the area. In all these events, we've tried to earmark something to go back to the community. We feel that the community's done a lot to support us through all these years. I've been here 20 years. Joe's been here for 25. Alabama's been here for 40 years, and we hope to be here for another 40 years. And in all respects, we try to do something back to the community. And the events like the Mullet Toss, we try to do something for the youth groups on both sides of the state. I think out there, all that is our legacy, is our youth, and if whenever we can do to help the next generation, I think the better off everybody's for it. So we've in the past have earmarked, roughly about $5,000 will come off this particular event, with equal parts going to the Alabama Boys and Girls Ranch, the Florida Youth Ranches, Sheriff's Ranches, both the Florida or Pensacola and Baldwin County Boys and Girls Clubs, the Boy Scouts troops that help out here, and also the Perdita Bay Youth Sports Association, one of the youth sports groups that I'm on the board of. So those things we think are important, and I think that's it's a minimal way for us to kind of give something back to the people out here throwing fish. In the years past, we've earmarked it's several $1,000s, in the neighborhood of $4,000 to $6,000 to be split up amongst the various youth groups on both sides of the line, both Florida and Alabama, because we are actually throwing a mullet from Alabama into Florida, or Florida and Alabama, which way the wind's going, and what kind of mullet we have,
Y'all ready to party? See ya? Everybody say no more boat scared. If you know now, no more boat in the day, no more boat. baseball bat.
My name is Terrence, and I'm from Southwest Louisiana. My music, the style of music we play is called Zydeco. Now, Zydeco music is Creole music. Now, just to give you a little background on the word Creole, the word Creole comes from a Spanish word, creolo, which means colors. Now, it's a French word that was first used to describe a person who was called French and Spanish. Now, as the French traveled all over the world, it became a word used to describe a person who was part French and African, French and Native American, French, African, Native American, French, African, Native American, and German, which is my ancestors. And, it's basically an old word that the French used to describe a multiracial, multicultural French-speaking person. And that's Creoles in Southwest Louisiana, Creoles in the islands, Caribbean islands. That's Creoles in the Seychelles Islands, and also Creoles in France. So that's Creoles all over the world. And the Zydeco music is the music of the Creoles of Southwest Louisiana. Now the word Zydeco comes from an African word from the Congo, Zaiko Laga Laga, which means dance. Now in the Creole communities, each different Creole community had different dialects of speaking French, and it was basically French, African, Spanish, and Native American, and some people in Creole communities would call a dance a Zydeco. In our community, we'd call it a lala. So that word Zaiko Laga Laga from the Congo, it kind of got broken up, the Zydeco and lala. But that's where the word Zydeco comes from.
Samuel Mims had built a farm here, and when the War of 1812 broke out, the British were trying to involve the Creek Nation as allies against the Americans. And the war faction of the Creeks, which were known as the Red Sticks, wanted to go to war against the Americans with British help. British were giving them arms and ammunition. The White Stick faction did not want to go to war against the Americans. They lived peaceably with them for a number of years. A lot of them had intermarried, and a lot of the participants in this battle on both sides were half-bloods. So the White Sticks and the Red Sticks actually had a kind of an Indian Civil War. And the Americans had jumped a trading party at Burnt Corn a month earlier before Fort Mims was attacked. And this infuriated the Indians to the point that they swore to take vengeance on one of the stockade forts. There were a number of them up and down the Tensaw. Fort Mims was one of the most heavily defended, yet it had glaring weaknesses that the Indians recognized. Namely, the portholes for firing rifles were cut just 3.5 feet above the ground, which meant that an attacker could fire into the fort as easily as defenders could fire out. The other thing was the gates were left standing open because the commanders here felt like they had an adequate force that they wouldn't be attacked, and because of the heavy traffic in and out of the fort with people and livestock, they just let the gate stand open, and dirt was pushed up against it, and the Indians saw this. So Fort Mims became their target. And they attacked with about 1,000 warriors. There were about 500 approximately people in the fort, and they defended themselves well. It was a 5-hour battle with a lull in between when the Indians actually had given up. The survivors had holed up inside the houses and the buildings inside the fort, but Weatherford arrived and exhorted them to go back and finish the job, and they came back and set the place afire and drove everyone out or burned them alive, and the rest of them, except for about 30, perished. And this set in motion the arrival of Andrew Jackson, who came down and within a year had defeated the Red Sticks at Horseshoe Bend. Then he went on to defeat the British in New Orleans and became a president of the United States. So this is a very significant piece of history.
This is my second year reenacting here. I've played Red Stick both times. Originally, I'm descended from the settlers here and from the band of Red Sticks, some of the Red Sticks that raided the fort, so I kind of can swing both ways on this. But it's a real honor to me to even be a part of Fort Mims. This is definitely part of my heritage and part of my Alabama history, and my family's also involved in this. So, and today I was passed down to be the portrayer of Chief Red Eagle from here on out until I decided it's time to step down. So that to me is an enormous honor, and I'm going to have a very hard time filling those shoes.
I am Victor Vasco, portraying Chief Red Eagle, or William Rutherford, which was the principal chief here at the time of this event happening. being of Creek descent, which he was to show the people of this area here what the Creek Slope people, how they lived, how they dressed, and the customs that we had. So best way I could do that was to be part of it.
Inside the fort. You may notice the gate is open. And on that fateful day, it was also open. As the settlers are gathering about their meal, this is Fort Mims. This was a crowded place. There were people on top of people. We truly don't have enough reenactors to portray it accurately, numbers-wise. We do have are going to do their dead level best to show you just exactly what it looked like.
This battle took place after the naval battle that people call the Battle of Mobile Bay. And this fort was built to withstand, in fact, it was supposed to be instrumental in defeating the Union Navy as they came through and took the bay. And when the bay fell, then the Marines were sent over here to garrison one of the artillery pieces, actually at the southeast corner of Fort Morgan. And there was an actual Marine station here. The Union infantry landed about 2 miles down at Navy Cove, and they slowly advanced on the fort. The fort was garrisoned with 450 men, and they were well equipped, well rationed, but the Navy bombarded from Navy Cove from the north into the southern part of the fort, and the infantry advanced, and they put us under siege, and it was about a week and a half, 2 weeks, and the fort finally just, they caught on fire. There was a citadel that caught on fire. And once they caught on fire, there was no place to keep people. It was unsafe. Everybody would have been massacred, so we surrendered. And many of us would be paroled. And in fact, our unit, I understand, is paroled, and we're going to be sent to Fort Blakely. In actuality, that's what happened. So we would again fight at Fort Blakely and be captured there at the fall of Fort Blakely, and then we'd be released as the war was over, which would be over from this date in about 8 months. So this battle really, it signaled pretty much the end of the Civil War as we knew it. And when Blakely and Mobile fell, then the war was over. In fact, Blakely fell on the exact day that General Lee surrendered Appomattox. So there's a great deal of history here. And it's a story that not many people know, and it's Baldwin County, and they should know the story, because a lot of people who live in Baldwin County, their ancestors fought here, and Blakely and Gaines, so it's a good thing to know what Grandpa did.
Well, we were portraying dismounted cavalry. The 3rd Maryland Dismounted Cavalry took part in the fall of Fort Gaines, and there were some dismounted cavalry units over here at Fort Morgan as well. And this was actually a siege type of battle with bombardment, shelling of the fort. But the Union Army did press up. They had sappers digging trenches, getting closer, and bringing up the siege guns. And at some point, this would have happened. The Union Army would have assaulted the walls and gone over it had not the fort surrendered first.
I think it would be really nice to have a lot more people to come out to be able to see how hard we work to preserve such a beautiful era in America's history. And I think they would have a lot more patriotism for this country if they did. We do try really hard to portray it as best we can, and it's gratifying. It's definitely great.
As for Fort Morgan, you can see that the fort itself has survived, and it's now a tribute to all of those brave men that fought against it. When the war was over, the majority of the Southerners and the majority of the Northerners more or less made peace. The war was done. Our patron, General Lee, told us we were Americans again. We were one country, be good citizens. We've tried our best. Places like this are sacred places. We've got to protect them. We've got to come and look at them and think about what happened.
Following Farragut's attempt to enter the bay, where again he met with some of my devices in the water beside the fort, they had a land engagement. The forces of the federal troops landed about 3,000 men back down toward what is now Gulf Shores and proceeded to march on the fort. As they did, they discovered a device that they were familiar with called a subterra shell. This is one of those devices right here. This is my invention. The subterra shell, today known as a landmine, took 7 pounds of pressure by any source, and especially a foot placed on it, and it exploded, and generally vaporizing the man who stepped on it. It would totally destroy them. Colonel Lucas landed approximately 3,000 troops from Fort Morgan in the direction of what is now Gulf Shores on the peninsula. He proceeded toward the fort with those troops. Inside the fort were some 400 troops. However, when he arrived at the fort, he discovered these devices, and he would not attack the fort. They could only cut off the supply routes and set siege to the fort. Well, by setting siege to the fort, they stopped income of any supplies, including water, which was very, very important. The troops inside the fort then were faced with the bombardment. The ships that had entered the bay then turned around in the north end of the fort and started a bombardment of the fort from the sea. And this bombardment lasted nearly 20, well, actually, the 5th of April, the 5th of August was the day they entered the bay. The 23rd of August was the day the fort surrendered. When they got into the bay and started the bombardment, they dismounted all the guns on the fort. And eventually they did hit the magazine inside the fort and destroyed all of the powder that he had to repel the forces. General Page had not placed sufficient supplies in the fort for a siege. His opinion was that there's no maritime man. He was an ex-ship captain, by the way, before he was a brigadier general. There's no ship mariner that will ever try to enter this bay due to the fact of the pilings that had been placed between Fort Gaines and Fort Morgan, narrowing the channel, and the channel was heavily mined with my devices. But they did. The Tecumseh fell to one of my devices. The Tecumseh being a 800-ton twin-gun turreted monitor. When the Tecumseh hit the mine, it blew the Tecumseh nearly 25 feet out of the water and in half. It went down in some 14 seconds. The complement of 150 men on board, officers and men, 6 survived. The rest lay off of the point out here, marked by a buoy at their location. During our reenactment this weekend, we had a salute to them. We did a ceremony over the grave site, or watery grave site of the Tecumseh crew. And we honor men of good conscience on both sides in this war. We fought north or south.
to do is show you some of the basic tools that we as beekeepers use. Of course, we have the veil, gloves. Generally, we have on a pair of coveralls to go into a hive. One of the things that we use is a smoker. We'll take a smoker, put pine straw in it or other material, light it, get it fired up and get it smoking, and then we'll usually go along the front entrance to the hive and smoke the bees. What this does is calm them down. And then once we get the bees kind of calm there, then we'll go to the top of the hive and generally lift it up, put a little smoke under there, and then go ahead and pull the top of the hive off. And this is this is actually a hive body and a super. Super is where the bees store the honey. The hive body is where the queen will be laying and the brood will be hatching out. What we'll do, normally the bees will have the frames glued down. They make a glue that actually glues the top down in the frames. We use a hive tool. We'll go in, prise a frame up, take it out, and when we pull the frame out, it will look essentially like this. It will be full of, this is the honey part. This will be completely covered with honey. We want it capped so that that lets us know that the honey is dry or has been dried out and sealed by the bees. And then what we do as beekeepers, we'll take a knife and we'll just cut the caps off of each hive, off of each frame, and then we'll take that frame and we'll put it in an extractor, which is just a tank with a basket in it. And what it does, it spins the frame around, and by centrifugal force, it'll force the honey out of the cone. And then we'll turn it around, extract the other side, and then what we like to do, that way you have a cone that's already made. We can put the cone back in the hive, and the bees then don't have to expend the energy to extract or extrude the cone and the time and effort that it takes to do that. They've got the cone already made. All they got to do is fill it back full of honey again. So that's the reason that we use these foundation that is strong, that is wired, so that it can stand the force of the extruder and having it being slung, having the honey slung out of it. If you just got normal wax foundation, it'll distort the wax and it won't work. So just in a quick nutshell, that's what we do and that's how we do it. But we've got an observation hive showing the brood area here. This is where the bees are raised. The upper level is where they store the honey. This is, you can see part of this hive or frame is already filled out, and the bees are working below, filling out the rest of it.
popping daylights all the way to Biloxi. Now we'll hit the Grand Seat, we're a winner. And on the boat field for a seafood dinner, we can be at the Florida Fan later that night. Doing it on a line with Rusty and Mike. And come on, baby, don't you wanna go down to Golden Mexico? Wash our words away. Yeah, come on, baby, don't you wanna go down to the Golden Mexico? Drive all night, sleep on the beach all day. Oh, let's go, down to the Golden Mexico, let the warm sea waters wash our worries away. Yeah, come on, baby, don't you wanna go down to the Golden Mexico? Drive all night, sleep on the beach all day. Down to the Golden Mexico, let the warm sea waters wash our worries away. Down to the Golden Mexico, sleep on the beach all day.
Heritage Day, I think, started in the 1980s. It hadn't been a long thing to do, but I think the Czechs started it, and I think it was Frank Cachero that was mayor at that time when they started Heritage Day. And it's just been celebrated ever since, and we're trying to grow it. We put in a committee this year, and it consisted of about 20 people, and they have really done their jobs. And we started a shuttle where we can park the cars over at the ball field at the other park, and they can be shuttled back and forth with Brat bus. That way a lot of them want to walk in this heat. We appreciate y'all being interested in the town of Silver Hill and coming down to take a look at our Heritage Day festivities. The county, I want to really tell them we appreciate how much they do for us and what interest they have in us, just like they do the big towns. Silver Hill's small, but they give us just as much attention to do anybody else, and so does the state of Alabama. So we're proud to have y'all.
We first started cooking in about 1965 at home, and then we started cooking for elk hunters, and we were gathering hunters up in the Gila Wilderness in southwest New Mexico in about 70s. So got about 29 years experience cooking in Dutch ovens, and then bought an old chuck wagon and started cooking. It wasn't long before the folks in Foley called and found out about us, and we did our first ever exchange with Foley in Guyman, Oklahoma, and I live in a small town in southwest Oklahoma named Hollis, Oklahoma. And this makes 4 out of 5 years that we've been back down here. We cook for the Rotarian Club today. We'll cook breakfast in the morning for the mayor's breakfast, and then we'll do Dutch oven clinics the rest of the time while we're down here, plus entertainment.
Is a little different than most all of the other fish, as it swims off the bottom. It's a flat fish, has both eyes on the same side of its head. Now, I talked to a fellow the other day from North Dakota, and he told me that he understood that flounders are born with one eye on one side of its head and one on the other. Now, I've seen a lot of moon changes in my lifetime, and I've never seen a flounder with one eye on one side of its head and one on the other. Both eyes have always been on the same side. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I'll show you a mullet. This is a mullet. If you ever been to a fish fry in South Alabama, you probably had a good dose of fresh mullet. This one right here, it's roe mullet season now. The mullet are getting ready to spawn, and it's a good time if you like the roe to get it. You can get it at a fairly reasonable price. I have also a Spanish mackerel. This is native of this area. They usually have a run of it in the spring of the year and again in the fall. It'll start out in South Florida and wind up in Texas. And then it turns, after it spawns, it'll turn around and come back. This is caught in nets, some of which are 20 feet deep and 1,000 to 1,200 feet long. If you don't have good muscles in those two fingers, you better not get into the mackerel fishing business. This is a blue crab. This is native of this area. We can catch the blue crab all year, catch it in traps, you can catch it in shrimp nets. You can go along the beach and dip it up, but this crab has to be at least 7 inches from tip to tip, the male, before you can keep it. One of the delicacies, and I don't know if you can see this or not, but I'm going to turn this crab around. This crab is getting ready to shed, and if it were in the water in about 2 days, this crab would come out of this shell, be soft for about 1 day, and then it would grow about 3/4 of an inch. This is a royal red shrimp. It's not native of this area, but we take it along with us, along with the white and the blue shrimp, the white and the brown shrimp. This is a royal red, comes off the coast of Tampico, down in southern Texas, off that coast, in water from about 12 to 1,800 feet deep. Got a pretty good size head on it. If you're a head sucker, you got a lot on this one to suck. This is a stone crab. This is something that's new to this area. We've probably been catching those for about 5 years. It's a crab that we're not able to keep. we have to take just one of its claws off and throw it back into the water, and it will rejuvenate another claw. So you get to eat this crab claw several times. This is a monkfish, comes from the deep water, probably 300 to 400 feet deep. When it's filleted and skinned, when you eat it, you're thinking you're eating a young lobster or some lump crab meat. The next item is, this is a puffer fish. We down here call it the blowfish. Most of the children that see this fish recognize it because it was one of those that was filmed or in the movie Nemo's movie. Of course, this right here is a delicacy in this area. It's the squid. If it's prepared right and not overcooked, one of the finest eats that you can get in this area. This is a no-name fish here. Comes from, I'm sure, the deeper water. It was given to me by one of the Gulf boats, so I'm not familiar with the name, but I can tell it's a deep water fish because its eyeballs are just about as big as its head. I'm sure that it's blind because when you get in water that's over 500 or 600 feet deep, it's dark anyhow down there, so why would you need any eyes?
This is our 10th year, and one of the reasons we come, of course, is the weather, because up in Minnesota right now there's 12 inches of snow, and it's probably about 10 above. The other thing is the food, but this has become a great festival for us. There's a very well-educated, aware public for wood-fired pots, which is not everybody's cup of tea because the surfaces are formed by the ash and the flame that flow through the kiln for about 4 days. So it's an acquired taste, and we're always extremely pleased when people here like the work and buy it. And we've, over the years, little by little, we've established a very nice customer base. And believe me, you've heard this, but they are the nicest people in the world in this area. They're just unbelievably friendly. They all come to visit. They all come back to buy something. So it keeps us coming back. The work I do, I started as an apprentice to a master potter. I was there 5 years, and I made mugs, plates, bowls, every traditional type of pottery. When I went out on my own, I wanted a little more, something more unique that had maybe my name, associated with me a little more. So I started wood firing, which makes a very unique surface on the pots. And then I started cutting the pots apart, reassembling more interesting sections and paddling them, so there's a lot of asymmetry in the pieces, so visually, hopefully, they're much more interesting to look at. One of the things I find with art is if, as you look at a piece, you continually will see something new, and that's a real goal of mine, is so the pieces, each time I look at it or a customer looks at it, they'll discover something. It just doesn't sit there as a nice blue little pot. Nothing against the blue little pot, all you potters, but this is my personal take on it. So a good friend of mine calls himself a kitchen potter, meaning he makes casseroles, plates, which is great. That's where I started. I'm trying to be more a living room potter. I want to move the pots, into the living room, so they're more viewed like a painting would be viewed, more as a singular piece of art. And to do that, of course, the wood fire plays a big part in achieving a unique surface. And the second thing is the cutting the pots apart, reassembling them with different sections of clay, hopefully makes them visually more interesting.